Mr. Nakacinda, let's begin firstly from your sentiments. You have accused the state of orchestrating the alleged break-in. What makes you make such a statement? What makes you believe that this was done by the state?
Well, first of all, the responsibility to protect and secure a former head of state squarely lies with the state. We have, of course, the office of president, the OP, and by those nomenclatures, it speaks to the fact that they're responsible towards the office of presidency. And the presidency, in this case, is not only in the person that occupies office today, but also extends to offices of those that occupied that office before, which is the former heads of state. And by extension, it also goes to those that were privileged to occupy office of vice president. You can, in a normal, society, that would be described as the presidency. The welfare of those people is supposed to be the responsibility of the state. But beyond that, the events that have occurred from the time former president left office, first of all, he is entitled to a particular outfit of security, a certain number of officers, and they must have a certain apparatus to be able to provide adequate security for him and his family. Systematically, we observed that they began to withdraw security from the former head of state, reducing or leaving him with a paltry 2 officers per night to provide security. In this case, one obviously has to man the gate. One is the one that is subjected to patrols. And even in terms of the apparatus required, they are not adequately furnished. Later on, you also can attest to the fact that we had the ADC, the aide camp of the former head of state, not only arrested on trumped-up charges, but also stripped of all the apparatus he was supposed to use to provide security for the former head of state. That we raised as a concern, we raised as an occurrence that was putting the former head of state in a vulnerable position, as well as his family. Of course, our concerns fell on deaf ears. Fast forward, look at the event that happened the other night. The preliminary inquiries have revealed that ZESCO switched off power in that area around 01 o'clock, up to somewhere around 02 to 03. And at a point that ZESCO switched off power, that is when the thieves, first of all, tampered with the power supply, as well as the electric wire fence that secures that place. And when you look at the operation and even what transpired inside the house, clearly it was a professional work undertaken. It is people that are well trained to do such operations. And to that effect, looking at the events that have occurred around that, it demonstrates clear, well-coordinated, what needed to be done in terms of disarming the security system at a residence, cuts power supply, and all those things. It's too much of a coincidence, colleagues, for us to just brush it off and expect that it was petty thieves that broke into the house.
Still on that, Mr. Nakacinda. I mean, we have been hearing of the crime rate in areas like Salama Park, which is quite close to Ibex area, where people have had their homes broken into as such. And we're looking at individuals in this case who decided to take advantage of the fact that there was no power within that particular neighborhood. You say this was something that was professionally done, and you hint towards it being, coming through from a certain institution. It was well organized, well orchestrated for it to happen. But then, yes, you have challenged the Inspector General of Police, the Minister of Home Affairs, and indeed the Republican President on this particular issue. But from moving away from it just being ordinary thieves that have been moving around that area and surrounding areas, how then could one be convinced that this truly could be beyond ordinary individuals wanting to get what is not theirs as common criminals would?
Colleagues, this is an embarrassing situation. It has never happened anywhere. And to try and normalize what happened there, we as citizens are also going to join in as accomplices in the recklessness of this government. The indictment against the head of state, the indictment against the Minister of Home Affairs and Internal Security, the indictment against the IG, and by extension, the indictment against the DG of the Office of President over this matter is huge, and it speaks to the fact that if a former head of state, I go by your narrative, would be so vulnerable as to have petty thieves enter his home, how safe are you? How safe am I? How safe are the ordinary citizens? This is an embarrassment not only in the region, it's an embarrassment on the continent, it's an embarrassment globally, that a former head of state, if we could even be proud sitting on a breakfast show saying petty thieves entered in the former head of state's residence. Imagine that. We are supposed to be ashamed to even discuss that. And that's how come the hot potato lies on the laps of Misaka and the Ichirema. The hot potato lies on Mr. Jack Mwimbu and Mr. Kajoba. They are responsible for making sure that the former head of state is secured and his residence is secure.
Now, Mr. Nakacinda, there's two issues that come up here. Sorry to catch you, but there's two issues that come up here because one, yes, we can look at it from the perspective of, yes, it's an embarrassment. It's very unfortunate that something like this happens, and security concern for the former Republican president is a genuine concern. But there's also the other side where others would make an accusation that this was well orchestrated and perhaps insinuating that this would have been well orchestrated by the state and using, individuals from the state here. But our concern for this particular matter, before we even address the issue of it being unfortunate and sad that it happened, but the accusations that some members of the public could also be making that this could have been well orchestrated from the state. Is this something that we can look at from that perspective, considering the turn of events and what has been happening in this country, particularly within that area and surrounding areas?
Listen, what is causing all of us to come to that conclusion is the conduct of our law enforcement agencies. And these law enforcement agencies, because of the statutory instrument that was passed that required them to report directly to the president, it brings the president into question. Let me give you an example. We have the office of DPP. Of course, there were issues that are still being dealt with in relation to the person holding that office. But unceremoniously and professionally, she's still in office. This government has stripped her off of her security. And this is a person occupying an office that is highly sensitive in the Republic of Zambia, but without any conscience whatsoever and consideration to the well-being of that officer. They have stripped off her security. If anything happens to that lady, who is responsible? Who is it that was stripping and reducing the officers required at the office? Who has made the former president vulnerable? It's the state. Why shouldn't we conclude that this whole operation is that of the state? And looking at the behavior of these people and how they abrogate the law, look at the issues to do with the Director General and so on. This is a mafia government that possibly moving forward, they will start eliminating people. And we're raising this alarm so that people can be aware. Let's not just trivialize these issues. Who has spoken in government? Has the president spoken about this serious occurrence? This should have been an issue that President Nakacinda should have addressed himself, or Home Affairs Minister should have addressed himself, or the IG should have addressed himself. But there's just a small statement coming from some fellow at Mulenga that there is a report about that instance. How can the security of a former head of state that has been breached in such a manner receive a deafening silence from those in government? What kind of mentality is that?
Well, Mr. Hamonga, Mr. Nakacinda, let's also not evade the fact that the residence of the former president is well known to many. Don't you think that he could be targeted because of this same situation, many knowing where he lives within IBEX?
But do you want the residence of the former president to be a secret? Is that what you are saying? We know where the current president lives is in community houses. We know that he also lives at State House. And Zambians naturally are respectful. We respect elders, we respect positions. For somebody to have the courage to go and Naramukuiba, Paniwa former president, imagine that you sit down and say, I'm going to steal at the residence of the former president. Which Zambians can do that? It has never happened to Chiruba. It has never happened to Kaunda. It has never happened to Rupia Banda. It never happened even to a family of Michael Sata or family of Mwanawasa. How come this time around, especially that the UPND have been on President Lungu's case? This gentleman, from the time he handed over power, and we should give it to him, he presided over very smooth transitions with witnesses to leaving, Kikwete and the other Nkoroma, the other former president, and of course our late former president, Rupia Banda. A smooth transition that has put Zambia still flying our flag high as a beacon of peace and presiding over a democratic process that will see a transition that is peaceful. Beyond that, for the past 1 year, colleagues, this gentleman has been so magnanimous as in more or less imposing on himself what we jokingly say house arrest. He barely moves from his house. The only activities that he may have conducted from the time he left office is to go to church. From there, it's just recently that he launched a foundation. He gave his successor enough room to govern without any interference. The people that keep on poking him and talking about him and canvassing around him is the UPND. And recklessly so, unfortunately, petty things that are raising against him. I don't know from whatever point of paranoia that they would do such things. We can only conclude that they have their own figment of imaginations politically that is causing them to have sleepless nights. And we have been trying to assure them, go to bed and sleep. President Lungu is, resting. He is in retirement. Leave him to enjoy his retirement. Use him for other purposes and responsibilities befitting a former head of state, and you'll be at peace. There's no need for you to continue drawing him into your petty politics. But they are not listening. They are obsessed with whatever fears they have in their, figment of their imagination. This that happened is unfortunate, and everybody can see that this is orchestrated to try and, harm the family and harm the former president, and we can put it to them. We believe they possibly are intending to eliminate the former head of state.
Now, Mr. Nakacinda, in as much as you make that allegation that it could be orchestrated to harm him and his family, coming through either from the ruling party or from the government, some sections of society have also suggested that this could also be some in-house plan from either members of the Patriotic Front or those who have been going to show solidarity, because you would agree that this is a man who's been visited by party members. We've also been seeing party sympathizers and supporters either outside his residence, especially with the recent events that have taken place in the country. People have been going to his home and paying him visits. So others are also suggesting that this could have also been planned from those who have been frequenting his house in the recent past.
Wallace, of course, that is a very foolish assertion to make or argument to make. But the issue is that it doesn't matter whether it's in-house or whatever it is. Where there is proper security, it doesn't matter whether it is an in-house, it is PF, it is UPND, or whoever. The responsibility to provide security and make sure that any threat coming from whether in and out towards the family of the former head of state and his life should never have happened. So to start arguing that an in-house arrangement is foolish, it's the highest level of idiocy I've never heard of. How can even start suggesting to justify the failure on the part of the state to provide proper security? You say that it's an in-house arrangement.
Well, probably Mr. Nakacinda, that's probably to counter the assertions that you and others could be making that it could have been orchestrated as well, because on top of the issue of his security, there are further assertions being made that this was orchestrated by either those in government or from the ruling party. So that's another assertion to counter that assertion has been made by yourselves and others. So if you consider that foolish, others would consider your assertions foolish as well.
In this case, you are saying that President Lungu must not be visited. Is that what you are suggesting? Is that because you think that if he's visited, then you are... I mean, it
probably that's not what the sessions are saying. The sessions are just that the fact that he's had people frequenting also increases the possibility.
But do you accept that the responsibility to secure the former head of state lies with the state?
I mean, it's constitutionally provisional as a former, it's provided for in the Constitution. So as a former Republican president, he's entitled to the security outfit.
Do you also accept that withdrawing officers from him and reducing him with and even those that the few that remain, you strip them of the apparatus, and you understand the reason I'm using deliberate apparatus required for them to secure the former state is actually making that office vulnerable? So, in this case, who would bear the responsibility? It is the state. And the state have been quiet from yesterday, apart from some trivial statement that has come from there among.